Good day, everyone. Gaza Media continues to bring to you more health programs through this very special platform termed Gaza University. You know, health, they say, is wealth. Once you are healthy, you are gaining a great fortune for your family. So it is the goal of Gaza Media to see all of you healthy. My name is Giled, your Gaza Media host, and you're welcome to this very special platform, Gaza University, a center for capacity building. So if you're watching us for the first time, make sure that you always log on to Gaza Media YouTube channel, subscribe, turn on your signal so that anytime we upload a new video, you'll be the first to receive a signal. And don't forget to leave your comments so that we'll know how we are doing. And also share our videos to your friends and loved ones. Today, we will be having a very interesting topic, a health topic for presentation, vaccination awareness, to be presented by Dr. Edmund Folefac, the General President of GBHS Fontem ex-students. Dr. Edmund, it's our utmost pleasure to have you in the program today.
Right. Thank you, Madam Moderator, and thanks again for joining you guys today to talk about this very important topic, vaccines.
Thank you very much, Doctor. I will come back to you. So if you are joining us in this platform for the first time, it's very important for you to note the following rules. Do not make distracting sounds. Do not make distracting movements. Avoid interrupting other speakers. Don't carry on side conversations when the presentation is going on. And after the presentation, if you have any questions to ask or any contribution to give, you will be given an opportunity to do so. So we call on Doctor to please stay put after his presentation so as to receive reactions from our audience. And we plead on the audience to also, be calm and wait for their turn to speak. Okay, that said, I would like to hand over the microphone directly to Dr. Edmund to go ahead with his presentation. Doctor, you have the microphone.
Thank you, Madam Moderator, and once again, thank you, everyone, for joining me today, or for allowing me the opportunity and the privilege to discuss this very important topic with you guys. So this topic, it's such an important one, and I realize that all of you are very highly educated people, but there may be many who are not so in health related fields. As such, my hope is to really talk about this as one would talk with lay people, and more than, even more importantly, my hope would be to answer the questions that you people may have, because sometimes as professors or lecturers and teachers and stuff, what we tend to do, and professionals, what we tend to do is to speak the language that we think people are hearing. But it is very much more important to listen to the people and hear what they are asking. And so one can actually use that as teachable moments to really be able to expatiate on things. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time, I'll introduce the topic, and I will rather answer a lot more questions than really make a class lecture or a public lecture on this. So that said, the fundamental question is, what are vaccines? So to understand vaccines, what vaccines are, we need to first of all understand the immune system and how our body deals with infections, because fundamentally that is or diseases generally. In this case, since we're talking about vaccines related to infections, I'm going to limit myself to vaccines as relates to infection. Primarily, one of the things I would really want to do is to also address the area of safety of vaccines. And that is the area where I would dwell a little bit more to tell people how those things are prepared and what goes into it. Because as a clinical trialist or a researcher who spent his time, part of his job doing clinical trials, which is testing new drugs that are coming into the market, albeit in cancer, I have a pretty good sense of how these drugs actually are prepared and got into the market, which is really one of the areas where our people really have trouble grasping. If they don't really understand that these are medications that there's a lot that goes into it in preparing them and getting them into the market to make sure that they are safe and effective, then you can see why people may be concerned about taking them. So let's go back to asking ourselves, what are vaccines? And as I said, to understand vaccines, let's ask ourselves, what's the immune system? So your immune system, our immune system is our body defense, or constitute our body main defense mechanism. If you think our body as a small CD, then our immune system would be like the sum total of all the security apparatus in that CD. And in the old days, what cities used to do was to build fences around some big walls around the cities to prevent enemies from coming in. Those would be in today's, in your body, if you relate that to your body, it would be what your skin is. And that's why your skin is very tough. But the walls that they built were not just walls, were not just physical barriers. Some could add a lot of things, electricity, poison, things that would actually deter the enemy from it. So that our body, the skin tissue, when you see it, it is not only just a physical barrier, but it also has a lot of chemicals that are secreted to ward off bacteria. So, but ultimately, microorganism would break the skin barrier and then would get into our system and then face the next part of our the system. And they will face some other part of the immune system that would initially engage in attacking those bacteria and then killing them. But again, you will ultimately get overwhelmed and then get into a position where the second part of the immune system and then the third part of the immune system both kicked in. So in other words, you're looking at the immune system is not just a body of soldiers, but it's also a factory of manufacturing all the weaponries that your body really needs to fight off infections. And so generally we would break down the immune system and say it into the innate and then the adaptive. The innate is what you're born with, and then the adaptive is the what we eventually throw out our body system, what our system trains itself to do based on what we are exposed with in life. And to talk about vaccines, the part of the immune system that will really be concentrated on would be the what we call the adaptive. And that part, the part of the adaptive that we'll be concerned with is what we call the humoral, and a humoral immune system. And so in this, if you think about a virus, it enters your body, or a bacteria, your body gets it, traps it, breaks it down. As it's killing it, it may break it down into tiny, tiny little bits of and pieces. Some of those pieces that the body then breaks down, they are little proteins or little snippets of the virus. The body then uses that, the immune system uses that to then train the immune system on how to identify those similar organisms in order to, in the future, if our body eventually gets attacked again. But the problem is that in order to train your body system to fight those infections again, or even in the first time, it may take this humoral immune system, which is actually the most effective part of your immune system, it may take it up to about 10 days to 14 days to train your system. That is too long to wait. If you wait that much, then your body may get overrun by the infection and then you get killed. And that's real, and that's how people die from infections. And this is why things like vaccines now become very, very necessary. And what vaccines are is the vaccines recognize they don't want to wait until your body gets attacked by an infection and then your body produces its own antibodies or defenses. Because even so, when the body attacks, tries to produce its own defenses, it may not even produce enough. So you don't, because since similarly to the fact that you don't dig your well when you are thirsty, you dig a well and wait. When you're thirsty, you go you just go fetch your water. You prepare your body to actually get prepared to defend your body from the infections by immunizing, by creating vaccines. And this has been a very, very, very important piece of medicine, probably one of the most important advances in medicine, apart from clean water and food and sanitation. Vaccines are probably by far the most, that has actually given us the most important advantages in medicine, especially in infectious diseases. So so when the vaccines, the type of vaccines that we have, how do we actually then manufacture those vaccines? We can take a bacteria or a microorganism, a virus, take it, we look at it, we study it in the lab, we take that and take parts of it, kill it actually, or maybe reduce its ability to cause disease, what we'll call life attenuated. And then we put it inside, we inject the body with it, we inoculate the body with it. So the body then gets, fooled. It feels that it's under attack. Then it produces the antibodies that would get ready and prepare the body so that by the time a reinfection comes around, the body then has enough antibodies or enough security, meant to defend itself, and the body gets rid of the infection that way. So you have the life attenuated ones, but you can also have the toxoids. Like you get the vaccine itself. I mean, you get the bacteria itself. You say what kind of toxins are actually produced by that bacteria. You take those ones and then you inject it into the body, like tetanus, for instance, and then that again produces the antibodies, and the antibody fights infection when the real disease come around. Sometimes we can get snippets, what we call component vaccines, which is like you take the entire organism and then you just take the snippets, just the piece of it that cause disease, and then inject the body with it again to achieve the same results. So the other ways that people are beginning to, I think the most advanced way that we are beginning to learn now is to actually go back and look at the gene. The gene is that particular instruction manual that really causes the infection in the first place. So say take COVID, for instance, you can look at it and say, what is the genetic code of the virus? Take just that and use it to trick the body to really go fight and produce the antibodies against the infection, against that particular infection, so that when the infection come around, that body is already prepared. And the reasons why we've gone from looking at this the life attenuated through looking at this genetic component vaccine is because the ones that are the life attenuated or the live viruses, like the diphtheria, for instance, that used to be given, or polio was the one of the ones that would give. So sometimes you could have we did those vaccines, and then those vaccines in some people who were immune compromised or for some other reason their immune system was not strong enough, and that then reactivated and caused disease very similar to the disease that you were trying to prevent in the first place. And so this is something that that happened, and we have walked away from that now to these newer things that we are talking about. For the dead viruses or the dead component vaccines, those ones, they may be good, but they don't produce, the antibodies that they produce don't last as long. And so so that you may then need to vaccinate somebody multiple times. So this is just a very small little way of how some of those vaccines are made. If you go back and then say, once you make them, you identify the vaccine then, and then you say, okay, we have now identified the particular organism that is causing the disease. We've studied it. We want to use it to make a vaccine. how do you go about then making the vaccine? And how do you test the vaccine to make sure that that vaccine is actually safe and effective and does what you really are saying that vaccine does? And this is a very, very critically important question, because remember that for vaccines, you're going to give it to people who are not yet sick. And you're going to give it to millions and millions and millions of people, if not billions of people in the case of COVID. And if you do it that way, you better be sure that it is safe, and you better be sure that it does exactly what you really say it does. And to achieve that, like all of medicine that you see in the in the market, you go from there are certain rules that must be made. There are certain regulations that must be made. One of which starts from the laboratory where these things are going to be produced. In that laboratory, you have to practice something that we call good good laboratory practice. That means that there are guidelines that come to your laboratory. Make sure that if you told us that you were using water that is 100% pure, that is, you are really truly using that water that is 100% pure. If you say you were actually keeping the air condition in that place and at the temperature at 4 degrees, then that temperature is really at 4 degrees. Any one of these things would invalidate whatever thing you are doing and can cause the whole of that process to be locked down and closed down. So all of this, and there would be what we will call like each one of these laboratories, there are all these things that you write, like your standard operating procedures. There are people who come in there, experts who come in there over time, regularly, to monitor and make sure that every one of these things that we're talking about obeys and follows strictly these particular rules that you talked about. Now, you go from the lab, you've now manufactured this chemical that you think can be a vaccine, or what we may call a candidate vaccine. Then you want to send it now to people like me in the clinic to go and try it and test it. Then when they come to us, there is what we will call good clinical practice, which is very similar to the good laboratory practice, but in this case, it's just the clinicians. And before it even comes, after you manufacture the chemical, long before it comes to me, you have got to go, they will test it in animals. And usually it is required that you test it first you test it in the lab and say, yeah, it's doing what it's supposed to do. For instance, if you want to say the vaccine generates antibodies, you must tell us what antibodies is generating and how much of it is generating. You test it in the lab, you show us that is generating that. Then they give you, then you go and test it in animals, usually 2 species of animals. They may say a horse and a dog, or a horse and a rat, and things like that. So you must test it in 2 species of mammals, of animals, and then get the right results, get the right dose, and then based off on the dose that you get from animals, we then extrapolate what kind of dose we're going to be testing in humans. And when it comes to humans, we then start it on the first phase that we usually test this thing is in something that we call phase 1 clinical trials. And that phase 1 clinical trial, what it does is we are actually asking safety. That is the first question we're asking, because it doesn't really matter if the drug works, if the vaccine works, but if it is not safe, what good is it? And if it is not safe, we really want to know what are the problems with that. And so because of that, we start with a very, very few number of patients, typically not more than, in a very typical drug, it will probably be not more than 20, but numbers vary. And even those 20, you don't give it, if you want to start, you don't give all the 20 at the same time. You may start up, do it for 3 people, make sure we know that it's safe, and then you go to the next 3, and then you go to the next 3, and there is a very, very way laid down protocol which tells us to say, okay, if you see this, then this is what you do. If you see side effects or if you see any safety concerns on this number of patients, this is what you do. And throughout, there is a fail-safe mechanism to say, if we see a certain number of safety concerns, we're going to stop the drug, either go back to the drawing board or actually completely just abandon that process in the first place. And again, those of us who do this, we have to have special training in what we call clinical trials, especially those early phase 1 clinical trials. And the companies that are manufacturing this and getting this, plus the regulations that come from the NCI, or I mean the NIH, and the different bodies, the FDA, or the different bodies that regulate, they are specific conditions that are laid down, specific training qualifications for people to get, specific training for institutions, and also making sure that the institution has the capacity to manage any potential side effects and stuff. So it's not just any hospital or any person who can just jump out there and then just say, yeah, I want to be part of the testing, and then they just give it to you. So they must make sure that they do this. So once you've gone past those first phase 1 clinical trials, then the next step is asking the question, yeah, if it works, it is safe. We now know that, I mean, not that it works. We now know that it's safe. We now know the dose that is safe. Then we're asking the question, does it even really work? That is what we go to phase 2. We go to phase 2, and the working here is under very strict conditions. So we take a few, maybe a few hundred, and numbers again may vary. And then you try this on those people, and then you say, yeah, there is evidence that, yes, there is safe, that these things are not only safe, but they may work. And then we say, okay, yeah, that is then good. We escalate it to what we now call phase 3. In phase 3, we're testing thousands and sometimes maybe tens of thousands of people. Now, the numbers, again, that we talk about 20, 80, and then hundreds or 1,000. This depends on, once you go past phase 1, those numbers then depend on what we call the effect size. And what we mean by that is, and this is based off on the statistics that the statisticians, the people, some experts who we call biomedical statisticians would calculate along with us, to sit down and calculate. For instance, I can say, okay, if I give the vaccine to 100 people, I think that the vaccine would work. I mean, like, instead of 100 people having COVID, I mean, instead of 10 people having COVID in the group that didn't take the vaccine, instead, we expect that there will be 8 people. If that is the case, I may require many more patients than if my hypothesis was that if I give the vaccine to those 100 people in one group and give the vaccine in another group, and then compared to the people who didn't take the vaccine, that none of the people in the group that got the vaccine would have a disease. Again, just take, for instance, let me give you a very simple example that would help you drive home this point. Imagine that I want to give 2 of you, I want to see how much each of you can drink before they get drunk, or who is a better, who can drink more than the other. If we are using whiskey, then it may just be 1 bottle, it may not even be 1 bottle, it may be half bottle. We can see who drinks half a bottle, because by the time, none of you may be able to finish a bottle. But if we're using a beer that contains like 5% alcohol, both of you may be able to drink 8 bottles, but somebody may only need 10 bottles to get drunk, while the other person, so that you see that the numbers that I would get in the number of drinks that I would require in this other experiment differs from the number that I would require based on all these things that we call the effect size and stuff. So as you are doing all of this as clinicians, there is also something that we call the Data Safety Monitoring Board. And that is a group of people who are also trained. And these people don't have anything to do with the trial period, but they know all about safety. They know all about the trial and stuff, and the safety and what potentially can happen. These people periodically would request the data. They will look into the data, they will look into the results, and then they will look at that and say, hey, based on what we are seeing, there are some safety signals. Based on, maybe there are some problems. If they say there are some problems, then they can order that trial to stop, and then review and make sure that those safeties are actually, one, if they are related to the drug, then those safety concerns must be fixed. If they are not related to the drug, then the first of all order for the once they ascertain that they are not related to the drug, then they can allow the drugs to continue. I mean, the trials to continue. For instance, and one of the critical things will be, let's say you are participating in a vaccine, and then you go somewhere and you develop a pneumonia, and you ended up admitted in the hospital. We would take that as a problem because we don't know. We may assume from off the bed that pneumonia is actually related to the vaccine, and we would have to hold the vaccine and wait. Once we ascertain that no, your pneumonia was actually because of an infection not related to the vaccine, then you can then continue the trial. So there are some safety concerns that don't require the trial to be stopped because they are minor, but there are some safety concerns that require the trial to be stopped. For those of you who have been listening to the COVID story, some of the candidate vaccines have had to be held, and they were held because there were like concerns about some people who had some really bad illnesses. Some turned out to be maybe related, but most were not related. They were just things that just because you are on the clinical trial doesn't mean that you cannot have another illness. But once you have it, we must document it. We must assume that it may be it, because our first inclination is for safety. Again, so so you do all of this, and throughout, as you're doing all of this, one of the critical things of finding out, making sure that it works, is that in many of the trials that we may do, the most what we call level 1 evidence of effectiveness. That means the highest level of evidence is when we do what we call randomized clinical trials. And sometimes we would actually even go the next step and say double-blinded. And I will explain what each of these terminology means. Randomized studies means that we basically take patients and the computer actually decides whether each patient who comes, the computer may say, let's say we want 1,000 patients, 500 on one arm, 500 on the other arm. That is 500 people would get the vaccine and 500 will not. We are not the ones it's not the researchers who decide. The computer comes and then decides. You come, we present the trial to you, talk to you, and then you say, yeah, I want to take part in this. And then the computer then decides and randomize you and say, okay, you may get a placebo or you may get the vaccine. And that is the randomized study. The double blind means you don't know what you are getting, and the treating you don't know what you are getting. Because if the vaccine is in a small little vial, what we would do is also produce something that is just like, maybe it could be sugar, it could be something that doesn't hurt you, it can't do you anything, but it looks exactly the same. And the reason we're trying to do that is to make sure that the clinician or the researchers we don't want to put in bias, right? Introduce bias into the study, because if I knew that people who are younger are less likely to get the virus and get so sick from it, and I wanted the vaccine to really to show that the vaccine works, I could just recruit all young people. Or if I knew that the people who are on the vaccine, I want the vaccine. I want to, if I were an unscrupulous investigator and I wanted the vaccine to work, I could put only people who are even less likely to have the virus, that people who are just working from home, socially distancing and stuff like that. And then I put the people who are not. So these are the things that we do in order to make sure that these things really are safe for you. And now go back and say, what has been the impact of vaccine generally? The very first vaccine was actually an accident, I will say by serendipity. This guy, Edward Jenner, was a very astute guy looking at something that we call smallpox. I mean, in those days, there was smallpox, which killed almost everybody that it infected. The death rate was so high. But it also had if it didn't kill people, it then left them with very ugly scars. So its cousin was called cowpox, which infected cows. But this guy just realized that, hey, he just noticed that, look, the women who were milking these cows never really got this particular infection. And his question was why. It turned out that he thought that it was probably because those people were producing the cows, they were infected by the cow virus and then produced natural antibodies that fought that smallpox when it came to them. And the cowpox was less lethal, and he was right. And he finally realized that, and he thought about this and then got, pus from somebody who had the virus, smallpox virus, and injected it into an 8-year-old boy. And there with that boy became cured of his disease. And then that's how we got the first vaccine. And from there on to now, I would say in sheer numbers, before vaccines came to Africa, 1 in 3 kids in Africa was dying, 1 in 3. And after vaccines, we are now in the same, that is so that vaccines have saved 1 in 3 of us. So how many of us are here? We're like, on this platform. That means probably a third of us on this platform would never have lived to see our 5th birthday, but not for vaccines. And even when those vaccines came, the WHO had to come in with money because they were so expensive when they first came that it was really just the people, the children of the rich who could get the vaccines. And those children of the rich could get the vaccines, the poor people died. So the WHO actually even had to donate money to bring these vaccines to us. Many of you will remember polio. And I don't know, you used to see, you will see your friends with a limp, and then you see them paralyzed. How many of you still see that today? It's almost virtually gone because this is vaccines. I don't know how many of you will remember that almost every child had measles when you were growing up. How many of your children still have measles today? None. Things like mumps, whooping cough and all of those. So these are things that vaccines have actually almost eradicated in Africa and around the world, and to the glory of, of mankind, because these were diseases and these diseases used to hit children much more because the immune system, remember I told you about the innate and the adaptive immune system. The adaptive immune system, when we're born, that adaptive immune system needs time to train itself, and babies don't really have it. And so when they're born, the adaptive immune system is still very weak. And so these children get sick all the time. And if you don't prepare them by immunizing them, the children would die. This is how many of them used to die from infections before the adaptive immune system eventually developed to a point where it could actually protect them. So we need to be very, very careful about when we hear stories on vaccines. I would want to end, I just wanted to walk you people through a process. I wanted to take a little bit of a different tack, walk through the process, because I know people are out there talking about stupid things like, oh, they're trying to sterilize Africa, or they're trying to do this. And then I have seen many of the videos that people talk about, like they'll put out there trying to malign vaccines and stuff. When you go back and do research deeper into those some of those things, that most of those clips that they put there are really not even related to vaccine in the first place. And why these people do this is beyond me. But let's face facts. Anything that you do, there must be, if I were telling you that vaccines don't have side effects, that would be disingenuous. That would be intellectual dishonesty. Vaccines do have side effects. And one of the side effects, but the side effects are so mild that it'd be almost like, just all of you in the developed world, you drive cars, right? I mean, or most of you drive cars, and none of you don't drive a car because, for fear of accidents. But people die from auto accidents. But you try to make them safe, safer and safer with passing time. seat belts and all the other times. I mean, with each passing generation, you make them safer. So nobody has ever argued that we should stop cars or maybe stop riding in cars because those cars cause accident and some people may die from cars. The same thing goes for vaccines. If you look at the vaccines and look at really like the number of people, the percentage of people who actually have serious side effects from vaccines, it's very, very minuscule. Instead, a preponderance of people who would have side effects from vaccines would be you go vaccinate the kid, you come back, the child has a fever, the child has some kind of, it's very similar to these fevers and sweating and, some of these things that you see. They are the same things. It's your immune system that is activated, that is actually trying to get, your system under control. That is actually, you are seeing that as part of a manifestation of your immune system. Because we're introducing a foreign agent, a foreign entity into your body. So your immune system is trying to ward it off and familiarize itself with it. So that is what may cause the fever and some of the things that we see. There have been very slight side effects. And yes, there have been cases where some people have died because of vaccines. One would think about like the polio again, but the later versions of vaccines have been incredibly safe. I think the biggest challenge with vaccines is usually the people administering them. Like, are you following the protocol as it was laid down? Or do you use like infected needles, and vaccinate people under unhygienic conditions, or probably give the wrong dose, or maybe you kept the vaccine at the wrong temperature and all of that and stuff, and so on and so forth. But when done appropriately, the risk for the risk of vaccines is pretty minuscule. And but when you stack that against the number of people who were dying of disease pre-vaccine, and those who would die, even who would continue to die without the vaccine, it's just a no-brainer that these vaccines are really the way to go. And especially for a country, for those of us in continents who come from poor continents like Africa, it becomes paramount. You want to prevent the disease before the disease gets you, because the disease gets you, it is not only that you may die from the disease, but the disease may leave you with a lot of disability, may leave you with unable to work, unable to take care of your family. So these are the things that we really need to be able to think about when we're maligning vaccines and listening to some of those terrible audios that go out there. So I'll probably end here. And I just wanted, for COVID, let me make a statement or two about COVID. That as of now, we have about I think there are about 4 of those candidate vaccines that are actually in that phase 3 clinical trial, which is actually the last phase before you go and do the application to get authorization to give, to administer that to people. And a lot of them, I think the hope is that by the end of this year, probably next month, we'll probably may be able to get the Data Safety Monitoring Board may come out with with a statement on it. And these people, when they come out with that, they're going to turn it over to another group of scientists who are experts in this area, have no interest or have no financial or conflict of interest in the vaccine itself. They're going to turn it over to them. They will study it. And if they tell us that they are safe, the FDA will then go do its own regulations and give the approval, and those vaccines will be administered. And my recommendation would be that once those things come, available, please, let's not only get the vaccine, let's get our parents, let's get our family to all get vaccinated. It is imperative. Vaccine saves life. Anti-vaccine campaigns kill people. Vaccines save life. Those people who are out there and making this real silly campaigns without facts. Really, these people are doing nothing but, a big disservice to humanity. And so I know you people may have some questions, and I want to just, step back here. And I know some of the questions that you would give, it would further clarify some of the issues that you may want to get. That you may want me to address. Thank you.